I take both classes, Advanced Environmental Science and Advanced Gradebooks.
Okay, I'm Daisy Gray. I'm also a senior at Carey Academy, and my blended course is Advanced Gradebooks.
So blended courses were originally introduced here at Carey Academy with the goal of exploring how hybrid courses would provide a greater learning experience for upper school students. The combination of virtual and face-to-face time provides each student with the flexibility to kind of experience what a college class schedule would be like. They have freedom to customize their schedules, organize their time, and essentially just take responsibility for their own education.
And I'm going to read off the different blended courses that we have here at Carey Academy and just a brief description of each one. So the first we have is Advanced Calculus A, B, and BC. So essentially combines 2 years of calc in one. And because it's this accelerated class, Advanced Calc 1 and 2 students have all 5 blocks a week in the classroom, but they also have time outside of class to complete other work. So in the classroom, it's just like a regular math class, but outside the work that they complete, they either work individually or use an online calc forum to collaborate with others in their class. We also have Advanced Gradebooks, and Gradebook students spend 3 blocks a week in the classroom and 2 blocks outside of the classroom on a 60-40 split. When we're not in the classroom, we usually engage in virtual periods, which usually take the form of us either working individually or collaborating with others on online discussion boards, just like we would have in the classroom, except it's online. We also have Advanced Environmental Science, and that's also on a 60-40 split. And when the students are outside of the classroom, they collaborate with others in their group to work on out-of-class projects. We have Advanced Music Theory, where in class students study the fundamentals and construction of music, and during the class they learn about these core ideas in the FaceTime session, and outside of class they apply them individually, and then they post their creations on Haiku, which is an online platform for scheduling and interactions, and it also operates in a 60-40 split. We have Regular Physics, which again is a 60-40 split, and they use in-class time to work on labs and out-of-class time to individually do write-ups. Physics is different from the other classes, however, because there's no pre-designated class time to actually go in and spend the 3 blocks in the classroom. The students have an open lab, so they can go and choose which class periods they want to go in and work on. There's also Creative Writing, again a 60-40 split, and in class they discuss the elements of writing with the teacher, and out of class they'll draft their own writings and critique others on an online wiki.
So all of us here are taking currently blended courses, so if you guys want to introduce yourselves and say which courses you're taking.
Hi, I'm Jack Lattimore. I'm a current junior here, and I'm taking Advanced Calculus A, B, and BC.
I'm Julia Gong. I'm a sophomore here, and I'm also taking Advanced Calculus A, B, BC.
My name is Colin Dworsky. I'm a senior here. I take Advanced Gradebooks, Advanced Environmental Science, and Physics as my blended courses.
My name is Neil Patel. I'm also a senior, and I'm taking Advanced Gradebooks.
I'm Cohen Dworsky. I'm a senior as well. I take Advanced Environmental Science, Advanced Gradebooks, and Physics.
I'm Julia Reich. I'm also a senior this year, and I take Advanced Gradebooks and Advanced Music Theory.
Hi, I'm Katie. I am also a senior, and I take Physics, Gradebooks, and Creative Writing.
So we have a couple questions, and we're just going to go through and ask, and as they have answers, they're going to respond, and then at the end, we'll have time for you guys to ask any questions you have about the blended learning courses. So if you think of any, maybe jot them down and just save them for the end. Our first question is, why did you guys choose to take a blended learning course?
Alright, so for me, as I was scheduling classes in my junior year for my senior year, which this year is kind of the first year we've begun at Carey Academy to offer a large amount of blended courses. And I kind of thought to myself, I'm going to college in 2 years, because this is last year me, and I'm thinking, like, what classes can I take to really prepare myself for the environment of college? And so I'm taking 3 blended classes this year, which I had gotten approved by our head of school. And so it kind of gives me a ton of free time, and because I also have a free period. So a lot of times during the day, I might only have like 2 or 3 classes in a singular day, and I'm still at school though for the remaining 4 or 5 hours. And it really just kind of opens up my mind to what a college experience is going to be like, because I'm not going to have a structured environment in college. I'll maybe have an 8:30 and then a 12:30 or something like that, and I have to be aware of what I need to be doing and like independent enough to control myself in that environment. So it's really preparing me for what I'm going to have to deal with next year.
College aside, personally, I I'm very self-critical about my writing, so it takes a long time for me to get a piece finished. And because I am taking 2 literary classes, I have a lot of writing to do. The free periods that I'm given in these blended classrooms allow me to get work done during school hours, so I don't have to, spend longer and longer into the night working on my writing or other homework, which is really beneficial for me.
I think one of the best parts about it is the virtual time that we have. And while you're not in class, you're not specifically tied to that course during that time. Like, you're allowed to work on your other course material, your other courses and the materials for those classes if you need to. But at the same time, you can't, like, just because you're not specifically in class, you don't have any ability to just neglect the work, because it's still the same amount of work as though you were in class every single period that you would have it as the class might have been the year before. But so it's still the same amount of work, and each student is still responsible for the same amount of things that another student would have been last year.
And there's both an online component and a physical component, face-to-face component. So you get what it feels like to maybe be taking a partially online class, but also interacting with your peers face-to-face. So I think that's a really valuable experience to have in taking a blended learning course.
For me, I took AP Calculus, AB and BC because it was the most rigorous mathematics course available to me, and I really appreciate the opportunity to independently discover some of these concepts both in and out of class, and work with others who have equal aptitude and interest as me in really going deeply into all of these mathematical concepts.
I took blended U.S. history last year, and I took that course specifically because it offered a different approach to learning history than your standard history course. So it was more project-based, more collaborative than your typical history class. So during the virtual time, we had projects to work on and to really explore the concepts in history instead of just learning dates and names that I was used to learning about in history class in past years.
Each individual student has an individual learning style as well. Some students prefer to learn through visuals, and other people are auditory learners. I identify as an auditory learner and a reading and writing learner, so having the 60-40 split with Gradebooks means that I get the face time I need in class, but I also get the opportunity to spend class time on my own, either in the corner of a hallway or somewhere else on campus doing my reading and writing section as well. So I'm maximizing both types of my learning styles, and that fits more students' learning styles than a 100% face time or a 100% learning or online activity. So it's kind of the best of both worlds.
So what has surprised you most about your experience so far?
Well, I've been kind of surprised how useful these online forums have been, because we get to discuss concepts in Gradebooks, or because we get to critique each other's pieces in creative writing. I get to refer back to that constantly, and it doesn't fade away because I am not forced to memorize it or have written it down. So because I'm able to go back to that and have it as a reference that I can, it's not quite tangible, but you can always go back to it, just have it archived is very beneficial.
And because I'm taking 2 advanced calculus courses in 1 year, I thought it would be so much of a workload that I wouldn't be able to handle it. But actually, in the perspective of time management, it's been a way for me to adapt to what it would seem like maybe a college course, more rigorous. And it also has allowed me to learn how to manage my time, because we have both an in-class learning component that's 100% unlike the other courses, and I also have to do the same amount of work outside of class on my own time. So it's really allowed me to adapt to how to manage my time in and out of class.
I also, when I was signing up for blended courses last year, was not thinking so much that I would maybe use those virtual times to potentially meet with those teachers anyway and get help. And that is really something that has been a huge benefit for me, is that if I'm ever having trouble on a concept, or if I wanted to have my Gradebooks teacher revise my paper, or have my environmental science teacher help me with my lab report, they're always open and ready. We have a program called Link, which is essentially like a chat messenger, and our teachers are essentially readily available, and we can chat with them and ask if we can come meet in their classrooms. It's been a huge help.
I think that's the most surprising part about the whole blended course as an idea is that it's so similar to college in that those free time, that free time set apart where each and every student of that class period is in the virtual time. It's essentially like open hours or office hours for a college professor, where they're just like my grade books professor, Mr. Uriose, he sits in his classroom and he's always there despite the fact that we're not technically there and that's not our designated time to be there. So if any of us, like he was saying, need help with any sort of concepts, like refining our vocab, refining our thought process, the way we develop our ideas in our essays, we can go spend our time with him, and then set that like individual time apart where we wouldn't have that opportunity to with all the students in the classroom setting.
What advice would you guys have for students considering blended courses for next year, or is there anything you wish you had known before signing up for these courses?
As someone who identifies as a student who procrastinates often, that's probably the biggest question, like, well, what about when students procrastinate? Are they just going to waste this time? I've actually become more efficient as an individual because I recognize that this is not only time for me to grow in this class, but also time for me to be productive overall, because I have more than just academics to worry about, more things to do, and I'd like to get done in a day. So one thing I would like to say to maybe students who are considering this class, even if you think you're going to procrastinate, still go out and do this class because, as Colin suggested, it will prepare you for the next step. So another thing as well is, even if you think you are productive and you're going to be a productive student during this time period, I wouldn't necessarily say you should take all blended classes just yet. You should start off with just one or two, and then maybe the following year, your senior year, you should take more if you realize blended classes is for you.
Yeah, I would say that's definitely a message that probably couldn't be said enough. I am also, probably could peg me as a pretty big procrastinator. I never like skip any work or anything like that. I kind of just let it slip until right before it's due, which is definitely not a good thing, but that was a big concern for me, having 3 blended courses and just having so much free time. But kind of just having the free time in school is just something that's so, I don't know, cool to me, that because when you have all face-to-face classes before, when you go home, you always just want to have that free time. But then when you have the free time and the ability to balance your work outside of class, both at school and at home, kind of just allows you to get all of your work done, and you're just a lot more calm and relaxed, and you're not really as stressed out because you have so much more free time to balance. And it's just been really awesome.
I think the biggest part of that idea is that there's really, like, even if you are a procrastinator, like the 3 of us happen to be, really, like, you don't have the room to do it, because it's still the same amount of classwork as your face-to-face, as 100% face-to-face classwork schedule would be like, and you still have the homework on top of your virtual class period work. So it's not as though during your free time you can just like be outside of class and like mosey around campus and enjoy yourself. It's really just a time where you actually need to make sure you're paying attention to what you're doing and responsible for your work. Because as Neil was saying, it was suggested for this year, which is when we adapted the blending learning course to a larger extent. It was suggested that you take 2 courses, and Colin and I happened to be taking 3. As he said, we had to get it approved. And it's just, the reason you have to get it approved is because it's just so much free time. You need to make sure that as a student at such a young age, we need to be able to handle the responsibility of having that much time in conjunction with how much work that we have to get done. And I think just the most important thing to note as a student who might come into the blending learning course is to, even if you're a procrastinator, you need to take advantage of your time and talk with your professors and do the best you can during that free time. Otherwise, you're going to have way too much work outside of school time.
And I would also say if the student I were just giving advice to was kind of like on the fence and not sure if they would want to take a blended learning course or not, I would definitely say, as the others have said, don't take too many at once, because it might seem a little overwhelming to have so much free time and like virtual time or face-to-face time at the same time. So maybe take like 1 or 2. And I would say if you want to challenge yourself and expose yourself to more ways to learn, like Neil mentioned with different learners having auditory and visual learners, I think this is a really good way to explore that, and it's a good way to challenge yourself, because as I said, if you're combining like different courses into one course in 1 year, then it's a big challenge and it's something that can prepare you for the steps ahead.
Do you have any tips for maximizing this free more efficiently?
One thing that so I'm just going to go off what I've been doing so far. I have several extracurricular activities as well in my daily schedule, as most all of us do, most academic students will. And instead of necessarily, I think this is why I'm more of a procrastinator, so to speak, because instead of doing the work, like the grade books work I'm supposed to do during my free periods, I do the next closest deadline. So if I have a key club project that I'm working on, maybe I'll work on my key club project or getting organization during my free time, and then at home or whenever the grade books deadline is approaching, I have time to do it then. So that way I can get things that need to get done soonest done first, and then the things that need to be done later done later. And yeah.
Yeah, as I was saying, as he just kind of alluded to, you're not tied down to the class when you're in that class's free time, or free periods, or virtual time. You're not like specifically forced to work on grade books time during that free period. So that's kind of the best part about it, is that you get to manage when you want to do a specific class's work, and you can plan out ahead of time throughout your free periods and manage your home time as well, where you want to do your work and what needs to be done the quickest, or at school versus at home, based on if you need teacher help or not.
I think it's also good to get ahead on things. So if you know you're going to go to a concert on Thursday night, you can go and use your virtual time wisely and get ahead on your work, so then you can really enjoy the concert instead of staying up until 2 a.m. finishing your homework.
So all of these courses are very unique, and some of you who are taking multiple USC, they have different schedules, different ways of organizing. Is there anything that a certain class has done that has really stood out as working really well?
Well, in creative writing, as in with physics, we use the same organizing program in which the doctor who teaches physics has created a program called OpenLab. Well, in creative writing, we use OpenStudio. And both of these just help us manage our time. We can select when we want to do work in class. We can invite other group members to work on something together by accepting certain invitations. We can set up if we want to meet in the classroom or out of the classroom. So being able to use this program that was originally designed for physics students in creative writing has been, really interesting, but also helps really just capitalize on time and the use of technology. So
I think the virtual aspect of the blended learning courses really allow for more collaboration among the students, because you don't have to be literally next to each other at a table in order to collaborate. So there's a common thread of like discussion forums. For our calc class, we have a calc forum, and so if a student has a question, you can post it, and then someone later on, maybe when they have time, they can help answer your question. You can collaborate on that question, figure out why don't you understand this, and it just helps to foster a kind of atmosphere where the students can collaborate with each other without having to be like right next to each other.
And one thing I just would like to add is that these classes, because there's a lot of freedom in the schedule, there's a 40-60 time split or a 60-40 time split, and usually like for grade books, those days that we have virtual periods will be Monday or Friday, and that's pretty consistent. But there are times where it switches around a little bit, like it's not set in stone. So if, for instance, a teacher can't make it to school, like they're sick or their child is sick, they can move that period around. So I've had a couple times my enviro teacher hasn't been there, and we've had a virtual period in place of a face-to-face period, and we'll either make that up later or we'll just do the classwork that we would have done in class in that virtual period. So instead of sitting in class with a substitute teacher and just having a free period, we can capitalize on that, collaborate with other students outside the classroom. So I found that really beneficial, and I know with grade books too, sometimes there's a week where we really need to have all face-to-face periods, and we'll do that, and then we'll just make up for it later. So that's something that I really enjoyed, and that's worked really well for me.
So what might you recommend in terms of changes in communication, curriculum, and or organization, or anything in general?
Well, in physics, it is a little bit daunting to have it entirely up to you to schedule what you want to follow, which labs to do, when you want to do write-ups, whatever. So I would recommend for teachers to have a sort of very loose timeline kind of already laid out, because right now in physics, he only posts when he would like for us to do assessments. I would like to see what he would recommend as a timeline for lab completion. So that's the only thing I would like to have changed.
And in that same vein, if I can jump already told you that we have virtual time usually on Mondays and Fridays, which means that I have class beginning of day Thursday, so from Thursday to middle of the day Tuesday, I don't have any grade books class, like in class, but we usually have assignments, which are often online discussion boards where you collaborate with your peers. And we're basically given like the whole 4-day period to do it at your own leisure, but the problem with that can sometimes be if you like to do all your work on a Friday night, but you have to kind of work in tandem with your peers, but they don't want to post until Monday night, it can often be difficult if you're given a huge block of time to kind of complete a certain assignment. So I think even with our virtual time, when we have free periods, if there was some sort of timeline, even if it was really vague, that could be beneficial.
Yeah, one thing that has been pretty nice is that as he started to notice that some people like to wait till midnight the night before to finish their online discussion boards, he started to ask that each student post at least once, say before the weekend or something like that, or at least once before the weekend and once or twice during the weekend, so that even if you're at the bare minimum of a student, and we have groups of 6 or 8 on the online discussion forums, so even if you're at the bare minimum of 6 posts, you have 5 other people that you can begin to facilitate a discussion with. So it really helps just on that basis that you can have like the bare minimum so that you can at least do something if no one else wants to do any work at that point.
And another thing just to kind of throw in there is because we have so many different teachers introducing these brand new blended courses, a lot of them have chosen different ways to communicate with their students in that virtual time. So we have this website called Haiku, which Daisy mentioned before, and the majority of our teachers and all of my blended teachers use that website, and they can post assignments on a calendar and we can access that calendar. But some teachers will do things called announcements where it just pops up in your dashboard that you have these things due for the week. Some teachers will post on the day that it's due, they'll say this assignment is due today, and you just are supposed to see that and work in advance. And some teachers will assign a post and put the assignment on that day, and then it's not posted on the due date. So it can be confusing trying to remember, oh, this teacher posts when it's due, not when it's assigned, and like it can be very confusing. So one thing that I would recommend is having teachers, although they should have unique courses, have some sort of uniformity in terms of communication, because it is hard to juggle. I think we've all adjusted, but it would be much simpler if they all went on the same kind of scheduling. I think we have time now to open up to questions. I think that's most of what we have.
I'm a science teacher, so like with the environmental, with any science, you have the content and the lab portion. So do you see that the in-class time is more of the lab portion, and then the virtual is where you're learning the content?
For sure. Most of the time when we have lab groups of 2 to 3, and for instance in my lab group, every single free period that we have designed for our virtual time, where we're not working on labs in class, we're working on the write-ups or our trimester-long projects together, or learning the specifics or in preparation for the next lab.
Okay.
So we go ahead and we're prepared for the lab in class so we can utilize the time in class the most.
And that was for environmental science, by the way. And for physics, a lot of what we do, because he created these robots himself and a program to run the robots, which is actually going to be a session like right after this, and I'll be there too. So yeah, but a lot of what we do is based on those robots. So what we come in class and he has kind of prepared like a couple problems for us to try and figure out how like make a certain robot run at a certain velocity, or how to copy a certain robot's like pre-made movement, so that we begin to understand velocity and acceleration and things of that nature. And so we're playing with that kind of stuff in class while we're also sort of doing individual problems outside of class and doing write-ups as well.
And in advanced environmental science, another thing we do is she'll do pre-labs, which is what we do in our virtual time, and we'll watch like videos that she has prepared for us and things like that to just gain a background on the information before we actually step in and do the lab practical in class. So that's really helpful because you come in already knowing kind of what you're going to do, but it's something you can do by yourself. It's not something that you necessarily need her to tell you. You need her to show you how to do the actual application. So that's really helpful.
And just for contrast, I actually took advanced environmental science last year before it was blended, and I actually found that a lot of times in class we'd be kind of working with our groups on projects that could easily be done outside of class. So I think like if I contrast my experiences with like Karen a better use of their time and being much more efficient.
Any other questions?
Okay, so to piggyback off of hers, I'm English and history, so what type of assignments for like great books do you do? Like what are you doing outside as opposed to inside class?
So I'll start with first English, then I'll actually talk about history. So first with English, in class sometimes there'll be discussions within the entire class, and that's very productive because you can bounce ideas off each other directly. You don't have to wait for someone else to respond, and that's kind of the only problem with the online discussion. But the benefits of an online discussion, which is what we do outside of class, is that you can see the history of the discussion. So in a face-to-face discussion, I could maybe only respond to the 20th and 21st comment made, but because you don't necessarily remember the first comment of the discussion. But with an online discussion, you can look at the first, maybe 9th or 11th comment, and you can start an entirely new thread off of that. With history, we used to have blended US history, but I've actually discussed, I'm currently taking advanced economics and advanced Euro, which are 100% face-to-face time, and I've talked with both of those teachers and have asked them what their thoughts are on moving to a blended learning course later on. And both have agreed that with their current teaching style and the way that they use class right now, that they think they could do maybe a 60-40 blended learning class where they have a lecture day for an hour and a half, which is what the double block is, and then they have the assessment day, and then the rest of the time is reading. Because we learn most of our history, most of our history classes through reading textbooks or reading online or reading certain authors. So it did give us more time to do those readings as opposed to having to stay up till 2 a.m. doing a lot of reading. And if we don't understand the reading or if there's a certain thing, a certain topic we have questions on, it's a perfect time to go see the teacher individually, because the teacher won't be bogged down to have 20 other students or however many other students in the classroom, and you actually get a better use of their time, the teacher's time, and the individual student's time.
Also tacking on with great books, one thing that is really helpful about the online discussions is for different types of people. Some people dominate discussions and can't talk enough, and then there's some people who maybe are a little bit more nervous. They can't really interject their opinions over other people, louder voices. So the online discussion, it doesn't matter who's talking at the same time. You have time to think out what you want to say, write it down, and post it for everyone else. So I think it's really beneficial in terms of enhancing everybody's experience and not just those of the people who can dominate discussion in class. And another thing that's really helpful is because we're grade books, we are focusing a lot on the reading we've done outside of class, and we'll do interactive projects. So our virtual time allows us to work with students and develop our projects, and then we can present them in class and have discussions about those in class instead of being stuck in one room while everyone is doing their own thing. So I think that's been really helpful as well.
Yeah, just to add one more thing for our gradebooks course, I think one of the most important things about the online discussion is the ability for everybody to refine their thoughts before the class-wide discussion takes place. So, for instance, last year we would come, when I took the first AP language, English language course, you were kind of just coming into an hour and a half classroom discussion without having discussed any of the material amongst your classmates, and it was just kind of like an hour and a half free-for-all. Whereas now in our gradebooks course we have probably at least a 6-post minimum requirement for each student on an online discussion board about various different topics. And the best part about the discussion board as well is that it's allowed to be about anything. So all types of ideas flow into the online discussion board. So when you come into the classroom, you're able to use the discussion time most efficiently, talking about the most controversial topics or the most interesting things.
And you can also have multiple discussions going on at once. We have the ability to have different threads. So you can have one discussion on one theme of a book and one discussion on another theme, and you can post on both simultaneously and tie them together, which is something you can't really do in a face-to-face
Yeah.
discussion.
Additionally, what the teacher will do is he will give us a document beforehand saying, these are some of the things you've learned. Discuss some of these points. Of course, we don't have to stick directly to them, but we can deviate, or we can use that as a launch pad if you're not really sure what new topic you might want to introduce. So that's always been really helpful.
And it's also really good for, I know that the gradebooks courses are at the cap student number.
Yeah.
And so because we have so many people in the class with the discussions, it's easier to, like you guys said, refine ideas, but it's really good for this bigger number of people to have a cohesive and more clear discussion than just jumping around and really not knowing what they're doing.
It's also nice because our teacher also reads the discussion boards. He doesn't, and he also comments too. So
And grades.
we get guidance from him and comments on what he thinks about ours as well. So he's not just giving us this space to like go talk in. He's also helping us through our thoughts and like helping us, you know, break that barrier and get into the delve into the very like analytical parts of the book, which has just been really nice as well.
Yeah, I agree. I agree that even though I'm not really taking a blended literature course, I really agree with what he said about how the teacher can facilitate discussions as well and like comment on it. Because in our Calc forum, if we like hit a dead end and we're not sure how to solve a problem or something, our teacher can jump in and post a new page and leave the thread alone. But she can say, here's how I did it, and we can talk about how we can maybe merge these methods of solving this question or something. So I really agree with what he said about teachers helping.
Also, one thing that I've found is that we do those online discussions before we come into class sometimes, and so one idea maybe is grown in a group of people, and then they can bring that like fully developed idea into class, and other groups who haven't discussed it yet can learn from that. So it's one way to really broaden our discussions.
My question is about tone and transparency, and so it may not be an issue here since you do some face-to-face as well, but I'm thinking in the online discussions, particularly if you have large bodies of students participating in discussions, that sometimes when you communicate orally with body language and smiles and a joke, it can come across differently than when it's written down. So I'm wondering if there are any misunderstandings or any issues or conflicts based on having these discussions, because I'm assuming you don't all agree on every single point, even if you start a new thread, how that works with your classmates. And then also this idea of transparency when you're online, when you don't know how to solve the calculus problem and you post, I'm not sure how to do this, if any of you feel uncomfortable with putting in print on the forum that you're lost or you don't understand, and if that is something that you grapple with in this forum.
I think one thing fortunate for all of us is that pretty much everybody at Carey Academy, at least all of the students and especially the teachers and faculty, are just pretty accepting of everyone. And so we're kind of in this environment that they've created for us and facilitated for us so well that we feel comfortable. And I know that that's not the reality in a lot of other schools as well. And so I'm not sure how it would work in terms of implementation at other schools, but at least at our school, we thought that it could be a problem when we looked at, when we were talking about potential problems for online forums, but we've actually sort of seen that instead of people kind of just like yelling at each other and starting and just like being argumentative just for the sake of being argumentative, it's kind of just become a way for us to solve the problems better, because instead of just saying, no, you're wrong, we're kind of just like, well, I looked at the book and I found this quote here and I feel like this supports me because, and then someone else comes back and says, well, I'm here, and then the third and fifth person can be like, well, I agree with you or disagree with you. And it's kind of a lot more about agreeing and disagreeing and it being okay to agree and disagree and allowing like the diverse opinion rather than just saying that only one person or two people are right.
It often isn't like people ganging up on somebody if they do have a different opinion. Because if you might have a different perspective, you're forced to buttress your argument. You have to try to prove your point a little bit. And then because you are also reading other people's comments, you having your own opinion challenged is a good way to accept that, oh, I might have misinterpreted. So it never feels like you're being attacked necessarily. Additionally, with having the online kind of separate the tone and inflection and all that, it does cause for a little misunderstanding. I've had somebody read one of my comments and misinterpret it a little bit, but usually gently we'll try to be like, it's not quite what she said, but you know, we see your point because you guys are agreeing, great job, you know, that's usually how it goes.
I actually find that the kind of impersonal nature of the discussion boards can actually be beneficial in a sense of tone, because I think if you're in a classroom and kind of getting into a heated discussion, it can be really easy easy to, you know, like, it can be really easy to be like, no, that point is wrong. And even if you're just attacking the point, the person might feel, you know, some people might feel personally attacked in a classroom, which is valid. So I think when it's on a discussion board, it's easier to kind of rebut the point instead of the person. So there's no like ad hominem that can go on in a classroom. So, and again, like what Colin said earlier, I do think at Carey Academy, like we have such a cohesive community that there are fewer misunderstandings because we've grown to understand each other's kind of online tone to the point where we can kind of see, even if that appears harsh, we know that the person doesn't actually mean it like that.
And
You go ahead.
so building on the something that was mentioned earlier, I think one of your questions was like whether the student would feel comfortable posting like their question online and maybe they would feel like exposed because they don't know something. I really agree with what Colin said about how we feel like it's okay to put ourselves out there because we understand each other. But also this is another beauty of the blended learning is that if you don't feel comfortable online, which not many people do, but if you don't, you can go to the teacher. I know there are many people who would who can go like after school because we don't have a split time. It's 100% face-to-face, but we do have people that will go into after school and talk to the teacher about a question they don't understand. You don't have to post in the forum if you feel like it's a record of something you don't understand. So that you have two different ways you can do it, which I think is what's really beneficial about blended learning.
And elaborating on that from the calculus perspective, we're all at, this is the very highest math course that Carey Academy currently offers, so the teacher purposely tries to make it really, really challenging, so at some point everybody's going to have questions, and so there's no real tension and there's no real arrogance with people in the class. They genuinely want to help other students rather than trying to say that they're better at math or understand the concepts more. It's much more collaborative, and I personally both asked and answered questions, and I think most students can say the same thing, so it's not really too much of an issue with some students being dominant.
What becomes a safety net a little bit, so
Yeah.
that's nice.
Tying it to how these courses will help us in the future, I think it's important that students are forced to kind of face and handle discomfort. So if they are put in situations where they're nervous about approaching a teacher or they don't want to ask for help because they're embarrassed that they're confused, going into college when we don't have this net of people that we've become so comfortable with, having those skills and already having experience with them, I think is going to really help us in taking that first step, because I know now I'm very comfortable approaching my teacher if I'm confused and saying, I have no idea what this is, please explain it to me. It's very helpful that I've had that experience here and that I can take that with me to college, where I'm not going to know my professor as well right at first, but I can go up to them and ask those questions because I've had experience doing it before.
One of the things I would add, I taught the blended US last year, and one of the things I liked about the discussion, I liked a lot of the things that you were talking about, but one of the things I found at the beginning of the year was I really had to encourage students very forcefully to not post long discussion points.
Yeah.
Right? I got to the place where I basically said if it's too long for me to see without scrolling, it's too long. Because I mean, think about how you try to get a discussion going in a classroom, right? You're not going to stand up on a soapbox for 10 minutes and talk, and that's how it feels like if you're scrolling through a long.
Gosh, yes.
So we've sort of gotten to the rule of, it's like about 8 to 10 lines, about as much as you can do before you got to start scrolling. And really, that's, if you're having a discussion, that's how you want it to be. It's a flow, right? And the flow needs to not be, I've established my treatise, and now you all respond to my treatise. It needs to be make a point, respond to what other people have said. And I think once that pattern gets going, it's actually pretty helpful. But I'm glad you raised that point, because I've certainly taught in schools where the tone could have gone haywire very fast, and maybe there's something about the culture of the class really does have to be set in such a way that people understand. We're going to be respectful in the discussion. We'll absolutely disagree sometimes, but we can do that in a way that's not disagreeable.
Yeah, I was just about to talk about that before you mentioned it. Even in our Great Books courses, in our online discussion, even like he looks at an 8-line post as almost too long. The goal of the online discussion boards is just a conversational tone where you're going back and forth on a few sentences a piece, where it's not like
because we did start out, everybody, of course, at the start of the year is like, oh, it's our first discussion board, we gotta write an essay for each post. But, I mean, as the course has developed, we've all sort of gone into this route of making 2 to 3, 4 sentence posts, where we're just directly asking the student that we want to, like, question what they meant, or what their specific thought process was on an idea, or why they think that we might not be correct in a certain way or something like that. It's more of, so I think, like, to answer your question, it's more of a conversational tone, and I don't think even in any of the discussion boards I've been involved in, any of us have really been like, oh no, you're completely wrong.
Yeah.
It's more of, I came at it from a different perspective. I think the author's doing this with the way he's writing it.
I have to run, but I do want to ask, it seems like most of you are seniors, and I think it would be helpful to know at what grade it makes sense to start juggling your own schedule and splitting your time and so on.
We actually talked about this the other day. We had like the in-depth discussion because I think we had some conflicting opinions. I guess the way I saw it, I'm a senior, this is my first blended class. I know some people take more than I do or have started taking them junior, sophomore year. But I think because I have a really heavy course load, I'm applying to college, I have extracurriculars. When I have a free period in the day that I'm not meeting for grade books, I'm really capitalizing on that and using it either for my virtual discussion boards or for other work that's kind of more pressing at that point. But when I think back to kind of my sophomore year and my freshman year, I had a much easier course load, so the free periods that I did have within the day, I wouldn't use as efficiently. So I definitely think that my perspective is, at least for me personally, it's a much better tool for like junior and senior year when you're really going to use the free period as efficiently as you can. But I know some people have different views.
Questions?
Hi, going back to our previous discussion of a moment ago, I'm actually going to be starting to teach my first blended course tonight on the college level. And I'm afraid that knowing the type of student that I'm reaching, or trying to reach, I'm going to have the exact opposite problem. It's not going to be, let's shorten it. It's going to be, I need relevant content. Give me something. And my question to that is more, have you, and this may not be a problem for Cary Academy students, but again, I'm going back to this, this is sort of more of a community college type program. How have you been, or are your posts graded for grammar, spelling? Again, that may not be a problem for you guys, but I'm thinking, you know.
It is. I speak up for it.
Okay. So how is that approached?
We are graded on our online discussions. I think it's more of a completion grade, I believe. I'm not sure. But he does look at our content, and if we aren't making sufficient comments, he'll kind of like call us out on it. So I think it is important to have some sort of structure in the discussion, as to say, like, you can't just post, hi, I think this, or I agree, and then be done with it. Like, you have to make some sort of contribution, and the discussion kind of dies out if people aren't making that kind of contribution.
Sure.
So having that structure, I do think, is important. I don't know if he's graded it on grammar or anything.
Yeah,
but.
so I think just a suggestion is, as mentioned before, he tends to, before the online discussion board is open, he tends to give sort of an outline of a few of the most important topics that he wants to have discussed within the boards. So in each one is usually a different thread, and students can go in and comment on each one. And I think that's one of the most important parts of starting like a blended discussion like that, is that you give the students a track to start on. You're not giving them a blank document to say, hey, go talk. You're just like, you're facilitating it in a way that allows them to start it themselves.
If I might jump in, I worked with all of our instructors that designed their blended learning courses, and we had very deliberate conversation about how to get students interacting on discussion boards and how to set up the expectation in a discussion forum. And so we devised rubrics based upon those discussions. and also developed exemplars on the forefront, so that before anyone ever posted, there was some idea of what the expectation was. And then it wasn't okay just to say, oh, I agree. Oh, I agree is as good as nothing. Might as well not have posted anything. So I think really conceptualizing how you, with a specific group of students, are going to get them to interact. And I would also argue that it's highly dependent upon the subject area and the qualitative ability of the students, their ability to write, have conversation, reading comprehension, but also just the dynamic of the class. You might have a really quiet class. You might have a class that isn't willing to risk putting themselves out there.
It's also important not to be too much of a helicopter mob in the discussion. I know Mr. Yuriose in Great Books, he told us one of the first days that he wasn't going to grade the discussions based on accuracy or I guess content, but he grades it more on if we participate, if we're actively engaged in the discussion. And so he said that he didn't want us to be worried about having the wrong idea or anything of that nature. He just wanted to let the conversation prosper without his hands always in the discussion. So I think it's also important to step back at times. If they need help, then definitely step in and try to facilitate something, but then once it gets going again, step out so you can really let it organically populate.
I think it could also be maybe even an opportunity for you just to get a benchmark of where their grammar skills and stuff like that are, because you could maybe ask them as part of a element of their online discussion to try and employ one or two different grammatical strategies and kind of just see their progress, and which is what we do in our essays as well, not as much in our online discussions, but for me, as I've begun to learn the different grammatical strategies, I've been able to put them into my online discussion posts as well. So it's kind of can go hand in hand with your in-class teaching also.
So because we're running a little bit short on time, I know we had 2 questions. Do you have one? I saw your hand up. Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll take you up front and then you.
Okay. So these courses are very technology dependent, and that's great and everything, but I'm just wondering what happens when you have technical difficulties.
The teachers are usually very forgiving.
I mean, at 10 o'clock at night, you cannot post, or something you don't understand, especially in the beginning of the year. This must be a huge problem.
One thing that actually has happened, Haiku sometimes does their maintenance at 2 in the morning, and as a senior, we sometimes are forced to do homework at 2 in the morning. Unfortunately, we are. So one thing that I've learned, because we also tried one Haiku discussion last year in the junior year AP advanced class, in the AP Lit class. We write it down on paper, or write it down on an email draft or something else. Just write it down somewhere else. And at that point, it's the only time I would say writing maybe a lengthier discussion with a lengthier paragraph would be okay. And then email my teacher, or I would just wait and before class, or as soon as I can, I would go to a teacher and say, hey, this is what happens. But just so you know, I really do have an understanding of the material, and this is what I thought.
Because they're much more accepting of if you come into class and say, I couldn't access the forms, but here's a Word document or an email of all my thoughts. Whereas if you were to come into class and say, sorry, I couldn't go online and post, I didn't do anything because I figured that would be okay.
And the same holds true even for in-class discussions. If we couldn't get a point in, or if we couldn't put a comment in, they're usually just just send us an email, just write something up and let me see it so I can see your thought process.
And communication with teachers is really key. I think our students as a whole here are generally really good about that, talking to the teacher immediately if there's an issue. That's really important because once there's a gap between your understanding and the teacher's understanding, there can be a lot of things that just go haywire. So it's really important to communicate with the teacher, and we have we email our teachers, like they said, we link them, we can do whatever you need to contact them and let them know what's going on, and that's a really key part of making sure that everything's like still in line.
Yes,
Go ahead.
I definitely agree. If I've been working on projects with technology for both blended and non-blended course settings, and I think if you're encountering a technical difficulty, the whole class probably is with you, so sometimes the teacher will decide to adapt the project to circumvent that difficulty or extend the due date, or let you just email it to him or her, and they're very accommodating with coming up with strategies to get around the technical difficulties.
And moving on to our last question, because we really are short on time.
Generally with college courses, the college professor has like the outline of the course. This day they're covering this topic, the next day they're moving on to something else, and it's the student's responsibility to catch up if they are lost. Do you find that this is how these courses are run too, that the professor or your teacher knows what they want to cover and they still cover it, and it's your job to catch up?
So long as they let us know, then, yeah, sometimes they don't like upload a syllabus, or sometimes they won't upload a timeline, then we falter, but.
I mean in terms of understanding the
Right,
content,
so
I'm sorry, I mean-
specifically for our blended physics course, we have a very loose outline of when things need to get done, and your assessment is, like, to take your assessment, you have to have X, Y, and Z completed to his standards before you can take the assessment. So there are people in our class who are on Unit 2 stuff and aren't ready for the Unit 2 assessment, but are using their time outside of class to meet with him and get ready for that. Whereas the people in class, and at the same time in class, they're able to work around that with their groups and figure out what we're doing in Unit 3 as well. So it's kind of a balance of taking control of your own free time to talk with the teacher to make sure that you're in line with.
So in the class time, the teacher is still moving on?
Well, it's specifically for the physics class, he is more of a monitor while he has set like problems to work on that you can kind of work on per day as in Open Lab we're allowed to kind of schedule how we want to. So you're kind of just doing your own thing, and if you have questions with him, he'll talk to you and he'll address that. So each class there's almost never a group that's on the same problem. And so he's kind of there to just make sure that each person is doing their lab correctly or the thought process correctly. And if you get to a problem and you're like, oh, why is my robot not matching the already programmed robot? Where's my acceleration not matching up? He'll come look at your program and say, hey, this is what you're doing wrong. This is the correct way to program it and such.
For 1 second, part of the reason that this is able to happen is because many of the facilitators are using mastery-based learning. So if a student does not grasp a concept, they're still able to go back. They have to build the blocks to achieve mastery. So if they don't master something, they have to go back and recomplete it, which is why you have to have this open nature of when you can participate in different activities or take different labs or whatever you have to do. So that's a key component, maybe a background information of what they're doing.
For us, we definitely have a very set syllabus, and it's great we get to see ahead. So before the start of each week, our teacher will post the out-of-class expectations in terms of homework, and we have out-of-class assignments, and she'll post those in advance, so we get to decide when in the week we're going to do those out-of-class assignments and what's most effective for us. So one's due on Wednesday, one's due on Friday, but we can decide when we're going to complete them as long as they're done by that deadline. And so it's nice to have that syllabus and know in advance to best structure our own time.
We have to go ahead and cut you guys off, I'm sorry.